Hi everyone, Shiny Key with Crevian here, and we're going to be going over a new playlist of setting up a backend for a multiplayer game. Now, this will work with just about any game you want to have in mind. I'm doing this kind of from the context of Unreal Engine just because that's what I enjoy working in right now. If you have a different front end, this will work for your different front end. So, we're going to jump right into this right now. I'm on my AWS account at the moment. You're going to want to sign up for an AWS account. Um, it is free to sign up for an account. And if you are new, you're going to get a 1 year of services for free. There are still a lot of free services after you go over that 1 year. AWS has what's called their AWS free tier. So there are a lot of services that while you're testing and developing and trying to debug stuff, they're not going to charge you, or they're going to charge you very, very little to do that debugging. Cognito does fall into this. Cognito has under 50 users is free for you. I would still check the billing pages that AWS has. I'll make sure to link that for you down below. But always check the billing pages to make sure you understand how much something costs or what the charges are. AWS is known for having a lot of hidden charges that you may not realize that you would be charged for. So make sure that you know what you're getting into and what you're doing. A lot of these tutorials that we're going to go over to are going to fall into the free tier. I will make note if it does not and remind you to delete the resources once you're done with the video. You're only charged for resources that you're using. So if you want to spin something up to play around with it, as long as you delete it, you're not going to be charged the full amount for using that service. So we're going to start off with arguably the most important aspect of a backend, which is authentication. We're going to be using Amazon Cognito for this because we're in AWS. To get here, once you sign up with your account, you're going to want to come up to your search bar and just search for Cognito. And it's this first one right here, Cognito. I already have one, as you can see here, so my start screen is going to look a little different than yours if you do not have any user pools. You'll probably have a get started button or a create pool button. Click one of those buttons. I have a create user pool button. Get to this screen right here. Okay, this is the first step to getting the Cognito set up. All right, let's go over some of the options that we have when setting up user pools. A lot of these options are going to be up to you as an admin, as the person creating this project. Some of them are going to be required, and I'll notate which ones are required and try to give you some expertise and some guidance as to why you might select one thing or why you may not select another thing. So the first thing we have here is sign in experience. Now, as you can see, our little warning message down below, you cannot change this once you create the pool. So this is locked in once you do this. If you want to change this, you need to create a new user pool. All right. By default, and you cannot unselect it, we use Cognito user pool to authenticate all of our users. So Cognito is the login, it is the authority, it is determining whether your password's right, it's controlling the sign up, the logins, all of that great stuff. The other option that you may consider enabling is federated identity providers. Now, if you see the description, that's a really fancy word for allowing your players or your users to use other services besides Cognito to authenticate. So if you wanted to allow your users to use their Google account or their Facebook account or their Steam account, if you wanted to allow other accounts to handle the authentication and pass that authentication data to Cognito, that is why you would check this box. Now, it doesn't hurt if you want to check boxes because again, you cannot change this in the future. So if you think, yeah, I think I might want that in the future, I would go ahead and check this. If you are adamant that you are not going to want that at all, don't worry about checking it. Just realize that if you change your mind in the future, you're going to have to recreate your pool. Okay. And if you do, come on back to this video. I'll still be here. So, coming down to our sign-in options, I'm going to leave this unchecked, just so we're all on the same page here. I'm not going to enable this. Again, you make your own choice here. Down below, we need to configure what kind of sign-in options we're going to use. I like using username and email. Phone number doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me as a username. This is what your user is going to type in a username text box on your front end to sign in. You can enable phone number if you would like. Again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's not wrong if you want to do that. It's just, I don't know, weird for lack of a better term. So I'm just going to check username and email. Down below, we have some additional username requirements. I actually do like checking this first box, allow users to sign in with a preferred username. This is, you can kind of think of this as a nickname. This allows you to set a nickname, or I'm sorry, it allows the users to set a nickname and allows that nickname to also be used for sign in. There's not really a security concern, in my opinion, whether you want to have this on, whether you want to have this off. Usernames, generally speaking, are considered public. They're not really what we call hidden values. They're not secrets that we need to protect and guard. So allowing the user additional usability to change, maybe have one username, but then change to a nickname that they would like to also sign in with, in my opinion, that's just a free checkbox for you that gives your user more options. The next one is make usernames case sensitive. Now, if you check this, you're going to get a warning. Well, not really a warning, but you're just kind of going to get a tooltip from AWS of make sure you know what you're doing here. I would leave this unchecked. It doesn't really make sense to make usernames case sensitive. Like I said, usernames are generally public. They're not hidden. You can usually see the username of another user. That's why it's a username on it. Making it case sensitive just kind of makes it more frustrating for your user and potentially more frustrating for you because you need to make sure that you're doing a conversion on your back end or on your front end before sending it to your back end. So if on your front end you think usernames look really cool in your font in all caps, you need to remember to put this in lowercase, or you need to convert it to what the pool has. So I would keep this off. You're not gaining much security by turning this on. You're just gaining a lot of frustration for everyone involved. So, okay, we're going to go on to the next one right now. Now, a lot of these options you can change in the future. These are configuration options for how your pool works. The first one is your password policy. I'm going to keep the defaults here, but this is where you would change your password minimum length and what values your password needs to contain. So by default, minimum length is 8 characters, needs to have a number, needs to have a special character, needs to have an uppercase letter, needs to have a lowercase letter, and the temporary password set by admins expire in 7 days. Now, a temporary password set by admin, this is not a forgot password link. This is you as an admin of the portal manually setting the user's password. How long does that apply before that password gets set? Okay. 7 days is fine. To be honest, you're not going to be using that. You as an admin shouldn't be setting passwords manually almost ever. There's very little cases where you're going to want to do that for a user. Okay. Next option is multi-factor authentication. You've got 3 options. You've got required multi-factor, which is the recommended here. You've got optional, and you've got no multi-factor. I would not choose no multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, if you're not familiar, is when you're on a website and you log in and it texts you or emails you a code and you have to use that code to log in. It's an additional layer of security. This is specifically talking about whether you let your users do it. So I usually set this to optional multi-factor authentication. The backend won't require it. It will be on the user of whether they want to sign up or not sign up for this. Now, recommended is obviously the most secure option of enforcing multi-factor. You have to have multi-factor. This is not a bad option to choose. You just might want to think about potentially alienating some of your players. Not everyone is able to use every form of multi-factor authentication, and some players may not be able to use multi-factor authentication at all. And if you have this required, they're not going to be able to sign in with your account unless you have some kind of federated identity set up for them. So I keep this as optional. Give the player or the user the choice of whether they want to set it up. Under methods, I check both of these. First method is authenticator apps using a TOTP token. So this is your Google authenticators, your Microsoft authenticators. This is your LastPass authenticators, your authenticator apps that you would scan a QR code with and get a code generated. Option two is maybe what you are more familiar with, the SMS message. They send you a code, you get the code on your phone, you enter the code into login, and you're off to the races. Cognito actually does this for you. That's why I would suggest just checking both checkboxes. It's a free checkbox for you as a developer and as an admin that just gives your users more options of how they want to set it up. You're not really gaining anything or losing anything by unchecking them. You're just limiting your players' options. Down below is user account recovery. This is the forgot password links that you see. This allows a user to reset their own password on your front end. By default, it is enabled, and I would keep that enabled because, as I said, you very rarely should be very rarely should be manually setting up a password for your users. You shouldn't be setting this. You shouldn't be overriding a user's password. Down below, we have what kind of delivery method we want to use. You have a few options, and you have one that I would not check. And as a matter of fact, AWS kind of tries to help you out here. If you do select it, it tells you, don't do this. Like, do not turn this on. Email only is, there's a consideration here. I like doing SMS if available, otherwise email. So it's going to, if the user has a phone number on their account, it's going to first attempt to send them a text message with that code. If it cannot do that for whatever reason, it is going to fall back on email. The other option that is technically more secure would be email only. That way, a potential bad actor or a hacker has to compromise. They have to compromise the person's phone and the person's email to get into the account. The reason this last option is not recommended, allow users to reset a password via SMS if they're also using it for multi-factor authentication. You don't want to do that because if a potential hacker is trying to get into your account and all they have to do is compromise the user's phone number, or they have to steal their phone, and not only can they send a forgot password link to themselves, they can also turn off the user's multi-factor authentication, and you're making it easier for somebody to take over this player's account. So I would not select this at all. I would say either SMS if available, otherwise email, or email only. You have a couple options on this. It's up to you with what you want to do with that. All right, coming into the next one. The next one is enable self-registration. This is if whether or not you allow your users to set up or sign up for your app. Obviously, you would want this turned on when you're in production. You want your users to be able to make their own accounts. In your testing phase, you may consider turning this off. You can turn this on and off at will. You may consider turning it off if you don't want users just signing up, or if you don't want anyone with API access to sign up for an account. When you are testing through the API, if you're trying to test a player sign up, obviously you are going to want this on. But just keep in mind, if you're testing this and you're done testing for the day and you want to make doubly sure that no one else is trying to sign up on your portal, you can turn that off if you like. Next, we have attribute verification and user account verification. Cognito, by default, has to verify accounts. When somebody signs up for an account, they are unverified. This is determining how that verification process is. By default, it is recommended to allow Cognito to send the messages when they need to verify. I would not turn this off. If you turn this off, you're going to have to, as an admin, go in and verify the account manually, or use an API call to manually verify this. For a user portal, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense of why you would do this. Next is which attributes to verify. So we can send an email address and verify the email, or we can send an SMS message and verify the phone number. Because we chose username and email address on the first screen, I'm going to keep it as the default here and set email address and then verify the user's email address. The phone number, if you use the phone number one on your front end, you do need to make sure you're enforcing a phone number to be put in. Otherwise, the user will not be able to verify their account. The other option that you have is sending an SMS message if the phone number is available. Otherwise, send them an email message. So if you wanted to give your users an option to put in their email and phone number, but the user only gave them their email, their email, um, this would allow you a both and. It would allow them to sign up with an email and a phone number, and it would use the phone number as a preference. Next, we're going to verify attribute changes. You can see that I can't change this, and you probably won't be able to either. This is directly tied to what you chose on the first screen. So if you're using phone numbers to sign in, you would have the option to sign in with a phone number and email address. Because we're using usernames and email addresses to sign in, we're requiring at least an email address. So the portal will not allow you to sign up unless you give the portal certain information, which is actually our next option, required attributes. By default, you're going to want to select a email, if I can find it here. No, you're not going to. No, you're not going to have to actually. I'm sorry. Oh no, here it is, email. So I'm going to select email. These are the required attributes. These are the attributes that you must send to the backend or sign up will fail. By default, username is always required. Whatever your username, whatever, as you can see up here, whatever you chose as username, so in our case, username is required. The sign up will fail if you don't provide a username. I am also going to force email though. So for this particular portal example, the user has to give a username and an email address to sign up. You are welcome to choose any other of these options as well as custom attributes, which I'll explain in a moment here. You are welcome to set up any of these other options as required. I usually don't. A username and email address is sufficient, and then you can allow the users to set these at their leisure. Next is custom attributes. We're not going to add custom attributes in this. This is where you would have, if you wanted to ask for more information from a player or potentially allow a player to put more information in that you do not see in one of the default fields, this is where you would add that if you have your own field that you want to do. I'm not going to add anything for this. The way that if you're going to continue on with the series and we're going to do player data, the way that player data is going to work will not require this custom attribute. We're not going to be storing attribute on the Cognito level. We're going to be storing that in a database. So don't think that, well, I'd like to store player data and like what level the player is, so I need to put that here. That's not necessarily true. This is specifically for your authentication. So we're going to carry on here. Next is how we're going to send emails. By default, what is checked is send email with Amazon SES. You actually want to move this over to send email with Cognito. This is what you want to do for production, but this also requires you to follow extra steps to set up a registered domain name and registered sending email addresses, and it requires you to set up SES. We're not going to get into that right now. This is what you want to do for production, and you can come back to this. So my recommendation while you're testing this out and while you're getting everything set up and make sure it works, I would just send emails with Cognito. This will use Cognito and Amazon domain names to send all of the communication to and from the player. This is more than sufficient for your testing purposes. Like I said, when you get into production and you want to release your product, you are going to want to come back to this and make sure that it's coming from your domains, just as a trust thing. Not that you can't trust Amazon, but from a player experience, if they're signing up for your game, they're going to want to see the email come from your game or your website, whatever it may be. Next, we're going to have to set up an SMS role here. You can create a new one or you can use an existing one. I do have an existing one because I already have a user pool. You're going to want to create that. So I usually just do product name SMS role. This is the role that will we'll probably get into roles a little bit more, but think of roles as permissions of what your accounts are allowed to do. So this is giving Cognito permission to call the SES service to send messages for you. You do need to set this. It will not let you if you do not. You do need to set this role even if you're using it with Cognito, because even if you're doing it with Cognito, Cognito still needs to be able to talk to other Amazon services to do this. You will notice a little warning right here. Like I said, Amazon gives you a lot of stuff to play for a sandbox, so they have certain sending limits and they have certain restrictions on who you can send emails to, who you can send phone messages. I would not worry about this right now. It will work with sending emails and testing purposes. You just have a daily cap on this, so this won't work for your production use case, which is why I said you're going to want to come back here. And as the warning is saying, like, hey, when you use this in production, you're going to want to email us and tell us what your use case is at that point. They do this to combat spam for our sandbox testing purposes. This is fine. We can ignore this warning message here, and we're going to move on. Okay, next is an easy one, just our user pool name. So I just call it product name user pool. You can call whatever you want. Next option is really up to you. I keep this off. This is Cognito hosted UI. This is Cognito will actually host all of the UI for you. So if you would like to test signups and logins and everything like that, feel free to check this. You can always turn this off later. If you would like, if you don't want it anymore, you can always check this off. I leave this off just because I use the API to create my user, and if when we get into an app, which is the next section here, you're going to use your app to do the sign in because you're making your own front end. You probably also want this off if you have your own website, because your website would be your front end at that point. If you have none of the above and you just want to make sure that all your settings are working and you can sign up and log in before developing your website, before developing your game, go ahead and check this box, turn it on. That will let you test it in the meantime. But just keep in mind, once you get either a website or a front-end client, you're going to want to turn this off. There's no point to have this on at that point. Next is our app client. This is going to be required for clients, for apps. So your website, your game, whatever it is. So we're going to name this a client name. I like naming this based on what client it is. So if you were doing it for a website, you might call this my website client. If you're doing it for a game, you might call it UE5 game client. Just be descriptive. You can have multiple clients. You have to set up at least one, but you can have multiple clients. So if you have like, I want a game client, but then down the road, you also want a website client, you can and you should use separate clients for different apps, okay? So we're going to stick with the game example in this case. We're just going to say UE game client because that's kind of the tone we're going to set for this playlist. We are going to want to generate a client secret. Now, this is kind of an important step here. If you do not generate a client secret, you're going to have to use access tokens and secret access tokens. It is not, let me stress that again, it is not a good idea to store access tokens and secret access tokens on anything that is user facing. The reason being for that is if you create an access token and a secret access token, because all of this, everything in AWS is locked down. You can't talk to AWS unless you have some kind of key to get in, okay? If you give an access token and a secret access token, you go over into your Unreal Engine client and you put access token and secret access token. If the player is able to somehow find out what that access token and secret access token is, even if you ban that player, they will still be able to call your backend despite being banned. This is not good, all right? The other problem is if you leak your access token or your client token by mistake, Same problem. Anybody who has those tokens, even people that don't play your game, can use your backend however they want. And you really better hope that your permissions are really set up. This is not what we want to be possible. We only want to authenticate from sources that we choose. A client secret is different. Even though it is called a client secret, it is not necessarily secret. It's okay for the player to know the secret because the secret is directly tied to Cognito and it only allows you to use user based actions. So the only thing that they can do with a client secret is request a login or request a sign up. That's all they're allowed to do. They can't talk to any of your other backend, and they need to give context for those requests. So when they request a login, they need to tell the Cognito who they are. They need to be like, I'm ShinyKey, and I'm requesting this login. Okay, it's probably a little bit more information that you want or care about. Point of this conversation: don't use access keys and secret access keys. Use client secrets. It's more secure. Just don't do it. And if you don't believe me, when you go in to make your own access keys and secret access keys one time, Amazon will also say that. When you try to do it, they link you almost 15 articles telling you why you shouldn't do it and what you should think about doing instead. So if you don't believe me and you don't want to take my word for it, I'm not going to be offended. Go take Amazon's word for it. So enough about that. Generated client secret. Turn this on. Name your client. We're going to make this a public client. A confidential client would be if you are using a secured server. This is more just kind of like paperwork, if you will. This is determining whether your endpoints are public or private. Confidential would require you to additionally sign your API request. So this is, as you can see from the description, this would be a server-side application. So if you're hosting a website, for example, you probably would want a confidential client at that point because it is server-side, it is controlled by you. This is a public client. So again, as you can see from the description, a native browser or mobile device app. This allows public user requests. And notice that, you notice the term there, user requests. So it adds a little bit more security on top to make sure that it was only allow you to do user-related stuff. A confidential client will give you a little bit more abilities to do stuff in the portal, but you're not going to want to allow just anybody to use that. So we're not going to touch app client settings, advanced app client settings. You can change these down the road. The one thing that we will actually enable is by default, you can see authentication flows, refresh token, and user SRP, secure remote protocol. The other thing you're probably going to want to enable is allow user password auth. As the name implies, this allows the users to use a username and a password to authenticate with your backend. Like I said, we're not going to touch these. These are determining how long your sessions are active, how long before Cognito forces the user to log in again. The defaults are fine. You may want to play around with them though. And we will, under read and write attributes, we'll keep all these enabled. This allows any user to modify their version of these attributes. So any user from the front end, as long as you support it from your front end, can use the API once they're authenticated to update any of the information you see here. If you don't want to be able to use that, like if for some reason you don't want them to be able to set their zone info or set what address they are at, you could disable the write option if you wanted, and then the users would only be able to read that, and then you would have to set that manually. For these variables, I would just keep them on. There's no reason really not to. And we're gonna hit next. We're almost done, I promise. Final screen here. We're on the review and create option. This is just a final going over all of the options we talked about, making sure that everything is set that you want. And again, you will see the warning messages over the fields that we apply. So this top one, Cognito user pool sign-in options, cannot be changed after the pool is created. Everything else down below here that you see here, you can change all of this after you create after you create your app. Okay, it's only this top part that you're not allowed to change once you create the app. All right, so scroll through here, go back if you need to. Just make sure all these options are set mostly the way you want it. When you get into testing, like I said, you can change these around if something's not quite working for you and you want something to work a little bit different. But after that, you are done. You're just going to create your user pool at that point. Now, we'll get into a little bit. We'll get into more of this when we start going into setting up the rest of the stuff for the backend. But at this point, you're able to log in and sign up. If you did have the hosted UI turned on, you would be able to open that. And if we went into this, I do not have it on, so I'm not going to see it. But if I go into, I think it's under signing experience, if I remember. I don't even think it's going to show me where it would be. But if you, let's see if I can find it for you. It is not even going to show it to me. So if you had hosted UI on, you would see it under one of these tabs. You would see a little link. You probably even would actually see it up here. It would show you the link that you could click on to test um, your portal. So, a couple things that we're going to want to keep note of in future videos when we start making use of this. I will point these out again. But a couple things you want to take note of. First is your user pool ID. This is your ID in your cloud. So I made this in US East 1, which is Northern Virginia. Um, it doesn't matter too much where you choose to make the pools. Northern Virginia is a decent place to create because it's fairly centralized. If your user base is more on the East Coast or the West Coast, or if you're in another country, if you're in a different country, you're gonna want to set the zone up where you want. My apologies, I probably should have mentioned that a little bit earlier on before we created the pool, but you're gonna want to have your region set to whichever one is closest to you. Well, it's whichever one is going to be closest to your users. You want to do it closest to your users. Amazon does have ways to make this quick. So even if, like, for me being in US East 1 right now, if I had somebody from Europe, it would be a little slow for them. But there are things you can do later on down the road to help with that. But that's what your pool ID is going to be. It's always going to be your region and then a number. This is how you would talk to your pool if you wanted to access it. And as you can see up here by the token signing URL, it's under Cognito, USD 1, and then your ID. Okay. So that's the first thing you're going to take a look at. The other one is where we're going to find our app. So if we go under app integration, here's where I was talking about the hosted UI. This is where you would customize. If you are using the hosted UI, you maybe just don't want a website, or you want to show an in-game website like that. This is actually where you could customize how the host UI works. So, an addendum to what I said before, if you could allow Cognito to completely use its own UI and keep all the sign up and login UI in here if you wanted to. The next thing we're going to notice is we're going to see the app client right here. Now, again, you'll notice that we can create additional. So if you have different use cases, I would create additional. I would create one client for every type that is going to authenticate. So if you have a game and a website, I would make two. I would make one for your game and I would make one for your website. That way, if you need to change anything or you need to revoke anything, or you can segment your services and take down what you need without affecting other services. But real quick, I just want to showcase this to you before we bring this to a close. In here, you have your client name. That's really not important, but you do have your client ID and you do have your client secret. Now it is hidden. I'm going to delete this afterwards, so I'll show you mine. Like I said, your client secret is not necessarily secret, but I wouldn't be posting this. I wouldn't send this to all your friends and send this into Discord DMs and make it your Discord status. I wouldn't do that. I would still treat this as protected, but it's okay if your users know it, if that makes sense. This client secret and client ID combination is how you are going to talk to Cognito. It is your fingerprint, if you will, for when you get to the front end UI stuff. how you're going to figure out which pool you're talking to. So it's okay for the user to know it. I wouldn't share it because anyone who knows this combination is able to talk to your pool and sign up and log in. So if you don't want Joe Schmo's website to be able to use your pool to sign up and log in, don't share your client secret. All right. So, anyways, I wanted to just show you where those were located. So, that is going to do it for this Cognito video. I apologize, it's a little bit longer. I wanted to give you enough information to arm yourselves to understand how the authentication works. The next videos that we're going to be looking at is how we can use Cognito authentication to control what a player and a user is allowed to access and use in the AWS ecosystem. Amazon makes it real easy for you to use stuff within their ecosystem, and we're going to explore that in future videos. As always, if you do have any questions for me, if I can explain something clearer, if something was just not clear, if you had a question over a topic I did not cover in this video, please let me know. I'm always available on Discord. You can let me know in the comment section. I do try and get back to all of you with that if you did have any questions. We do have a Patreon below, not required. Absolutely no pressure. I really enjoy making these videos for you all. Patreon is just a way if you would like to say thanks. There's absolutely no pressure for you to subscribe or look at that, but it is down there if you would like to have a little bit another way to say thanks. Membership start is as low as $3. Any little bit is always appreciated. Thank you all for watching this video. I'll see you all in the next one. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.